The rain hammered down on the cracked asphalt of a forgotten highway rest stop, turning the gravel into a slick, muddy trap. It was just past midnight, and the neon sign of the dingy diner flickered like a dying heartbeat, casting erratic shadows across the empty parking lot. Inside, a little girl, no more than 10, huddled in the corner booth, her thin frame shaking not just from the cold, but from the terror etched into her wide, haunted eyes. She clutched a frayed stuffed bear, its fur matted and torn, as if it were the only anchor keeping her from drifting into the abyss. The waitress had called the authorities hours ago, but no one had come. The girl, Ava, whispered to herself, "He's coming. He has to come." Her voice barely audible over the relentless patter of rain against the windows. The door burst open, with a gust of wind, slamming against the wall and sending a chill through the sparse room. A man stepped in, water streaming from his leather jacket, the kind worn by those who lived on the edge of the road. Ryan Cole, 40, and weathered like the miles he'd logged on his Harley, shook off the downpour and scanned the diner with eyes that had seen too much loss. His face was a map of scars, faint lines from old fights, deeper ones from a fire that had stolen his world 2 years back. He didn't notice the girl at first. He was here for coffee, black and strong, to chase away the ghosts that rode shotgun on his late-night runs. But as he approached the counter, her gaze locked onto him, fierce and unyielding, like a lighthouse cutting through fog. Ava slid out of the booth, her sneakers squelching on the linoleum, and made a beeline for him. Before Ryan could order, she wrapped her arms around his leg, burying her face against the rough denim of his jeans. "You're here," she murmured, her voice muffled but certain. The waitress froze, coffee pot in hand, exchanging a puzzled glance with the lone trucker at the bar. Ryan stiffened, his hand hovering awkwardly in the air. "Kid, you got the wrong guy," he said, his voice gravelly from disuse, edged with the wariness of a man who'd built walls higher than any desert canyon. He gently tried to pry her off, but she clung tighter, her small fingers digging in like roots, seeking soil. The diner fell silent, save for the rain's symphony outside. Ryan's mind raced, flashes of smoke and screams from that nightmarish blaze, the one that took his wife, Eleanor. He'd locked it all away, buried it under the roar of engines and the freedom of the open road. No room for attachments, no space for promises he couldn't keep. Yet this child, with her tangled brown hair and eyes like polished obsidian, refused to let go. "I don't know you," he repeated, softer this time, crouching down to her level. The scent of wet earth and exhaust clung to him, mixing with the diner's stale grease. Ava looked up undeterred. "You do. You promised." He stood abruptly, signaling the waitress for that coffee to go, but Ava followed, trailing him like a shadow, her bear tucked under one arm. Outside, his bike gleamed under the flickering light, a black beast ready to devour the highway. Ryan straddled it, the engine rumbling to life with a throaty growl that vibrated through the ground. "Go back inside, kid. Someone's coming for you." She shook her head, climbing onto the bike's rear fender as if it were the most natural thing. Her determination pierced something in him, a crack in the armor he'd forged from grief. With a sigh that carried the weight of unspoken regrets, he handed her his spare helmet, too big for her small head, and revved the throttle. The rain-slicked road stretched ahead, a ribbon of uncertainty under the stormy sky. As they rode into the night, the wind whipping tears from Ryan's eyes, or were they rain? Ava leaned against his back, her warmth a foreign sensation against the chill. She didn't speak, but her presence hummed with quiet insistence, like the low hum of a distant storm. Miles blurred by, taillights of semis fading in the mirrors, the acrid tang of wet asphalt rising to meet them. Ryan's thoughts churned. Who was she? Why him? The fire had burned away more than his home. It had scorched his memories, leaving gaps where emotions should be. He'd wandered since, a lone wolf with his biker crew, the Iron Vows, scattered across the southwest, bound by oaths older than the scars on his knuckles. They pulled into a roadside motel just before dawn, the kind with vacancy signs buzzing like angry hornets. Ryan killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the drip of water from the eaves. Ava slid off, still glued to his side, her hand slipping into his calloused one. "My safe place," she said simply, as if it explained everything. He stared at her, the first light of morning gilding the horizon in hues of gold and crimson. Safe place. The words echoed hollowly in his chest, stirring a vague ache like a half-remembered dream. He booked a room, 2 beds, though he doubted she'd use hers, and they stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind them like a seal on a forgotten pact. In the dim lamplight, Ryan peeled off his jacket, revealing tattoos that told stories of battles won and lost. A phoenix rising from ashes on his forearm. A vow etched in script across his chest, "Iron promises hold." Ava perched on the edge of the bed, watching him with those unwavering eyes. "You saved me once," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion lining her face. "From the fire." Ryan froze, a cold sweat breaking on his brow. The fire, his fire, Elena's screams, the crackle of flames devouring everything. But this girl, he shook his head. "I don't remember. I don't know you." Lies, perhaps, or truths buried too deep. She nodded, unfazed, and crawled onto his bed, curling up beside him as he sat staring at the peeling wallpaper. As the sun crested fully, painting the room in warm strokes, Ryan felt the weight of her trust pressing against him. Outside, the desert woke with the calls of distant coyotes, the air thick with the promise of heat. His phone buzzed, a cracked relic from better days ignored for now. Little did he know, hidden in its fractured memory lay a video, a ghost from weeks after the blaze. Him, soot-streaked and broken, holding a trembling Ava, whispering, "I won't leave you, that's my promise." But for now, the amnesia held, a veil over the redemption waiting to unfold. Ava slept soundly against his side, her breathing a rhythmic reminder that some bonds defied forgetting. The iron vows would hear of this soon, his crew, brothers forged in fire and fury, ready to ride for one of their own. But Ryan, alone with the girl who claimed him, felt the first stirrings of something long dormant, a call to honor, pulling him back from the edge. The road ahead twisted with secrets, but in that motel room, under the watchful eye of the rising sun, a forgotten oath began to whisper its way home. The motel room smelled of stale smoke and faded lavender from a long overdue air freshener, the kind that clung to the air like an unwanted memory. Sunlight sliced through the thin curtains, casting elongated shadows across the threadbare carpet. Ryan sat rigid on the edge of the bed, his boots still laced, as if ready for a quick escape. Ava's small form pressed against his side, her breathing soft and even, the stuffed bear wedged between them like a silent sentinel. He hadn't moved since she'd drifted off, his mind a whirlwind, trapped in the calm of the morning. The weight of her, light as a feather, heavy as regret, anchored him in a way that both unnerved and intrigued him. He glanced at the cracked phone on the nightstand, its screen spiderwebbed from a drop he couldn't recall. It buzzed again, insistent, vibrating against the wood with a low rattle that echoed his unease. Ryan reached for it, thumbing the power button. The display flickered to life, notifications piling up like unanswered debts, missed calls from Jax, his second-in-command in the Iron Vows, texts from the crew asking where he'd vanished to after last night's run. "You good, brother? Radio silence ain't like you." He ignored them for now, scrolling absently through the gallery instead. Blurry shots of endless highways, sunsets bleeding into canyons. Elena's smile frozen in time from before the flames. Then, deeper in the archive, a video thumbnail caught his eye. A grainy clip from a hospital corridor, time-stamped weeks after the fire. His thumb hovered, heart pounding like a piston. He shouldn't watch. Memories were landmines best left undisturbed, but Ava stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep, and something in her innocent trust compelled him. He hit play, keeping the volume low. The footage jerked to life, him, bandaged and hollow-eyed, slumped in a plastic chair outside a pediatric ward. The air hummed with the beep of monitors and muffled sobs from nearby rooms. In his arms, a soot-smeared girl, Ava, though he didn't recognize her then, clung to his neck, her face streaked with tears. "They took Mommy," she whimpered, voice tiny against the chaos. Ryan's recorded self, voice rough but steady, stroked her hair. "I know, kid, but you're safe now. I got you. Promise I won't let go. That's iron vow stuff. Words that stick." The video cut off abruptly, the screen going black as his thumb slipped. Ryan's breath caught, a sharp intake that tasted of dust and disbelief. The room spun for a moment, the walls closing in like the smoke from that cursed night. Elena's laughter, the crackle of inferno, the rescuers pulling him out. But the girl? Flashes pieced together, sirens wailing, the acrid bite of charred wood, hands reaching through the haze. He'd blacked out after, the doctor said, trauma sealing off chunks of his life like a vault. Temporary foster care, they'd called it later. A brief harbour for the orphan from the adjacent unit in the blaze. But why her? Why him? The promise echoed in his skull, a ghost whispering accusations. He set the phone down, hands trembling, and rubbed his temples. Ava shifted closer, her hand finding his in sleep, as if sensing the storm brewing inside him. Outside, the desert stirred to life. A distant truck engine growled to life, gravel crunching under tires, while the sun climbed higher, baking the air with the scent of creosote bushes. Ryan stood carefully, easing away from Ava without waking her, and stepped onto the narrow balcony. The motel overlooked a stretch of barren highway, mirages shimmering on the horizon like false hopes. He lit a cigarette, the flame dancing briefly before the wind snuffed it, forcing him to cup it protectively. Inhaling deeply, he exhaled a plume that twisted into the blue sky. The iron vows, his chosen family, brothers who'd pulled him from the wreckage of his old life, deserved to know. Jax would rally them, no questions asked. But this, a kid claiming a bond he couldn't grasp, it felt like stepping into quicksand. Back inside, Ava's eyes fluttered open, dark and searching. She sat up, clutching the bear, her nightgown rumpled from the journey. "You watched it," she said, not a question, her voice carrying the quiet certainty of someone who'd waited too long. Ryan turned, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed like a barrier. "How'd you know?" She shrugged, small shoulders rising and falling. "Your face. It changes when you remember." He crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling before her. The carpet scratched his knees through his jeans. "Listen, Ava, that fire, it took everything from me, my wife, my home. If I said those words, I don't. I can't pull them back now, but I ain't equipped for this. You need real help, social services, family." Her lower lip quivered, but she didn't cry. Instead, she reached out, tracing the phoenix tattoo on his arm with a fingertip, light as a breeze. "You are family, the only one left. The bad men came after, looking for me. Said I saw too much." Ryan's jaw tightened, a flicker of protective instinct igniting despite himself. Bad men. The fire hadn't been ruled accidental, whispers of arson, covered up by local suits with greasy palms. He dismissed it then, lost in his own grief. But now, with her words hanging in the air like smoke, suspicion coiled in his gut. "What bad men?" Ava's eyes dropped to the bear. "The ones who started it. They hurt people. You hid me once. Do it again." Before he could respond, his phone erupted in a call, Jax's name flashing. Ryan answered, voice low. "Yeah?" Jax's gravelly tone cut through, laced with concern. "Brother, where you at? Crew's gearing up for that supply run south. You vanished after the diner tip-off. Waitress said some kid latched onto you. That true? Ryan glanced at Ava, who watched him with unwavering faith. The desert wind howled outside, carrying the faint rumble of approaching bikes. It's complicated. Meet me at the old crossroads, noon. Bring the full ride. He hung up, the decision settling like dust after a storm. Ava smiled faintly, scooting to the bed's edge. See? You're remembering. They checked out in silence, the clerk eyeing them curiously but saying nothing. Ryan strapped Ava's bear to the bike with bungee cords, her helmet comically oversized as she climbed on behind him. The engine roared to life, a thunderous heartbeat against the quiet morning. As they pulled onto the highway, the sun beat down mercilessly, turning the blacktop into a ribbon of molten silver. Wind rushed past, tugging at their clothes, the scent of sagebrush whipping through the air. Ryan felt the first threads of memory weaving back, promises forged in fire, loyalties that outlasted scars. The crossroads loomed ahead, where the vows would converge, engines growling like a pack ready to protect their own. But shadows lingered on the edges, hints of corruption chasing them, testing the iron of their vows. Ava's arms wrapped tighter around his waist, her voice carried on the breeze. We're going home now. Home. The word tasted foreign, yet it stirred something deep. A redemption uncoiling like a road, unwinding into the unknown. The bike's distant roar grew louder, a symphony of solidarity, as the truth edged closer, 1 mile at a time. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The crossroads baked under the midday sun, a desolate intersection where two highways clashed like old rivals, marked only by a weathered signpost leaning crookedly against the wind. Dust devils swirled lazily across the parched earth, kicking up grit that stung the eyes and coated the tongue with the taste of forgotten places. Ryan eased the Harley to a stop at the edge of the cracked pavement, the engine's rumble fading into a low purr before dying altogether. Ava clung to him from behind, her small hands fisted in his jacket, the oversized helmet tilting her head back as she peered over his shoulder. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the faint metallic tang of hot metal and sun-scorched sage. In the distance, the horizon trembled with the approach of thunder, not from clouds, but from machines. A convoy of bikes crested the rise, a rolling wave of chrome and leather, their engines harmonizing in a deep, guttural chorus that vibrated through the ground. The iron vows. 20 strong, brothers bound by ink and blood, their cuts emblazoned with the phoenix emblem that mirrored Ryan's own scars. Jax led the pack, his broad frame hunched over a customized chopper, beard whipping in the slipstream like a banner of defiance. They fanned out in a loose semicircle, kicking up clouds of dust that settled like a veil over the gathering. Engines cut one by one, leaving a ringing silence broken only by the creak of cooling metal and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Jax dismounted first, striding forward with the easy confidence of a man who'd stared down worse than uncertainty. His eyes, sharp as flint under bushy brows, flicked from Ryan to the girl half hidden behind him. "Brother," he rumbled, clasping Ryan's forearm in a grip that spoke of unyielding trust. "You look like hell warmed over. And who's the shadow?" The others hung back, a wall of tattooed arms and watchful gazes. Veterans like Marco, the quiet medic with hands steady from battlefield patches, and Lena, the only woman in the crew, her wrench-calloused fingers twitching as if ready to fix whatever broke next. Ryan swung his leg off the bike, helping Ava down with a gentleness that surprised even him. She kept one hand in his, the stuffed bear dangling from the other, its button eyes staring blankly at the assembly. "This is Ava," he said, voice low, the words scraping past a throat dry from the ride. "Says I saved her once, from the fire." Murmurs rippled through the group, heads turning, memories of that night surfacing like smoke from embers. The blaze had claimed more than Elena. It had singed the edges of their world, pulling the vows into the aftermath to drag Ryan from the brink. Ava stepped forward, chin lifted despite the sea of intimidating figures towering over her. The sun glinted off their chains and rings, casting fleeting rainbows on her face. "He promised," she said simply, her voice cutting through the tension like a clear bell. "In the hospital. Said he'd never leave." Jax crouched to her level, his massive form folding with surprising care, the scent of motor oil and leather wafting from him. "That's so, little one. Ryan's got a way of keeping his word, even when it bites him." He shot Ryan a look, half question, half challenge, the lines around his eyes deepening. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck, the phoenix tattoo flexing under his sleeve. The video replayed in fragments in his mind, his younger self, voice cracking with exhaustion, binding himself to this child in a moment of raw humanity. "It's fuzzy." Doc said the trauma blacked out chunks, but she's sticking like glue. And now she mentions bad men, the ones who torched the place. The words hung heavy, stirring the crew into motion. Marco pulled a battered notebook from his saddlebag, flipping to a page scrawled with notes from back then. "Arson cover-up, yeah. Local PD buried it quick, said faulty wiring. But we heard whispers. Developers eyeing the land, insurance angles. You think she's tied in?" Ava nodded vigorously, her free hand tightening on Ryan's. "They came looking after. Said I saw the fire start, the shadows with the cans." Her words painted pictures in the air, flickering flames, hurried figures in the night, the acrid bite of accelerant that no official report had acknowledged. Lena knelt beside her, offering a strip of jerky from her pocket, the gesture maternal in its simplicity. "Brave kid, we've got your back, both of you. Vows don't break for ghosts." The group closed in subtly, forming a protective circle, the sun casting long shadows that merged like intertwined fates. Ryan felt the pull, that ancient thread of loyalty weaving tighter. The desert stretched endless around them, a canvas of ochre and blue where secrets hid in the folds of canyons. He glanced at Ava, her eyes reflecting the unyielding sky, and something shifted inside, a lock turning in a door long rusted shut. "We ride to the old safe house," he decided, voice gaining steel. "North of here, off the grid. Check that video full, see what else it shakes loose, and keep eyes open. If these shadows are real, they're not done." Nods rippled through the crew, a silent oath renewed. Jax clapped him on the shoulder, the impact solid as bedrock. "Iron holds, brother, always." They mounted up in unison, the symphony of ignitions roaring back to life, a beast awakening. Ava climbed behind Ryan again, her arms secure around his waist, the bear strapped securely now in Lena's care on the bike beside them. The convoy surged forward, tires biting into the dirt shoulder before merging onto the blacktop. A silver vein pulsing through the wasteland. Wind howled past, carrying the whisper of creosote and freedom, the heat mirage dancing ahead like elusive truth. Ryan's mind raced with the pack. Flashes of Elena's final smile, the hospital's sterile hum, the weight of a promise he'd buried but never truly lost. As miles unspooled, conversation crackled over helmet comms. Jax coordinating scouts, Marco cross-referencing old contacts for arson leads. Ava's voice piped in once, soft but clear. "Thank you for coming." Ryan didn't respond aloud, but his grip on the handlebars eased, the road's vibrations sinking with a heartbeat long numbed. The safe house loomed in memory, a ramshackle cabin tucked in a dry riverbed, stocked with supplies from vows runs, a haven for those the world forgot. There, under the cover of dusk, they'd unearth more than footage. They'd confront the corrosion eating at justice's core. But as the sun dipped toward the jagged horizon, painting the sky in strokes of fire, a shadow flickered in the rear view. A lone vehicle, too sleek for these parts, trailing at a distance. Ryan's instincts prickled, the old warrior in him alert. Ava sensed it too, her hold tightening. "They're watching," she murmured against his back. The convoy pressed on, engines thrumming with purpose, the bonds of chosen family a shield against the encroaching dark. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was this ride, mile by unforgiving mile, where forgotten oaths ignited like embers into flame. The safe house squatted in the elbow of a dry riverbed, its weathered timbers blending into the rust-red cliffs like a scar on the landscape. Dusk bled across the sky, turning the jagged rocks into silhouettes of ancient guardians, while the air cooled to a crisp bite laced with the earthy musk of sage and cooling stone. The convoy thundered in, bikes kicking up plumes of dust that hung like veils in the fading light. Engines growling to a halt in a synchronized hush. Ryan cut his throttle last, the Harley's rumble echoing off the canyon walls before silence claimed the space, broken only by the soft patter of settling gravel and Ava's quiet sigh of relief against his back. She slid off first, helmet in hand, her small feet planting firmly on the packed dirt as if staking a claim. The crew dismounted in a ripple of leather and chains, forming an instinctive perimeter, Jax scanning the ridgeline with binoculars pulled from his vest, Marco unloading a duffel of tools and tech that clinked like hidden promises. Lena scooped up Ava's bear, handing it over with a wink that softened her grease-streaked features. "Home, sweet hideout, kiddo. Stick close." Ava nodded, but her eyes stayed on Ryan, who lingered by the bike, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm scarred by old burns. The shadow in the rear view had peeled off miles back, vanishing into a side canyon, but its presence lingered like a bad aftertaste, sharpening every sense. Inside, the cabin smelled of aged pine and faint gun oil, its single room lit by a lantern that cast flickering pools of gold across mismatched furniture. A scarred oak table, cots pushed against walls lined with shelves of canned goods and maps yellowed by time. Ryan eased into a chair, the wood creaking under his weight, while Ava perched on the arm beside him, her presence a steady warmth that chipped at his resolve. Jax fired up a battered generator outside, its hum filling the air with electric life, powering a laptop that Marco connected to Ryan's cracked phone. The group gathered, shadows dancing on their faces as the screen glowed to life, the video cued and ready. "Let's see what the ghosts have to say," Jax muttered, his voice a low rumble that cut through the tension. Ryan nodded, throat tight. As Marco hit play, the footage resumed from where it had cut off in the motel, hospital fluorescence buzzing overhead, the faint echo of footsteps in the corridor. Recorded Ryan, eyes bloodshot and bandaged arms slung across his chest, held a smaller Ava on his lap, her face buried in his shoulder. "The fire took a lot," he said on the clip, voice hoarse but firm. "But it didn't take us. You stay with me till we sort this. Iron vow means I keep my word, no matter the miles." She sniffled, nodding against him. "Promise? Cross my heart, kid. You're family now." The room held its breath as the video looped, then Marco paused it, zooming in on a background detail. A nurse's chart on a clipboard, blurred but legible enough to catch a name, Detective Harlan Voss, listed under Incident Follow-Up. Whispers stirred among the crew. Lena leaned in, her ponytail swinging like a pendulum. "Voss? That sleaze from the East Precinct? We crossed paths on a charity run last year. Guy's got a rep for burying cases that smell like money." Marco tapped keys, pulling up a makeshift database from old Vow's contacts. Voss tied to land deals. The same developers rumored in the arson whispers. Fire wasn't random. They torched it to clear the block, low-income units, folks like Ava's mom in the way. Kid must have glimpsed something in the chaos. Ryan's hands clenched on the table's edge. knuckles whitening like bleached bones in the desert sun. Flashes assaulted him, not just Eleanor's cries, but smaller ones, Ava's, pulling her from a smoke-filled hallway adjacent to his burning home. He'd collapsed after, paramedics prying her from his arms, but the vow had stuck, even as grief erased it. "I left her there," he said, voice cracking like dry earth. "Woke up in the ward alone, thought it was all a haze." Ava's hand found his knee, small but unyielding. "You didn't leave. You fought for me with the doctors. Said I was yours, till safe." Her words pierced deeper than any blade, stirring the blocked river of memory, emotions flooding back in salty waves. Jax paced the creaky floorboards, boots thudding softly, his shadow stretching long across the wall. "This changes the ride, brothers. If Voss and his shadows are circling, we're not just protecting a promise, we're cracking a cage." The crew murmured agreement, a tapestry of nods and steely glances. Marco sketching a timeline on a napkin, Lena checking ammo in a locked cabinet with efficient clicks. Outside, the night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant vows, the canyon wind whispering through cracks in the door. Ryan stood, pulling Ava gently to her feet, her trust a mirror reflecting the man he'd buried. "We expose them," he said, the words tasting of resolve like cool water after thirst. "For Elena, for her mum, for every forgotten oath." But as the group planned into the night, routes to old informants, decoy rides to shake tails, a low rumble echoed from the riverbed, not thunder but engines, faint and probing. Jax killed the lights, plunging the room into inky dark, save for the laptop's glow. Ryan scooped Ava close, her heartbeat syncing with his. The bear pressed between them. "Stay quiet," he whispered, the cabin's walls suddenly too thin against the encroaching unknown. The crew melted into positions, windows watched, doors barred, the air thick with the scent of oiled leather and anticipation. Shadows moved outside, silhouettes against the starlit cliffs, testing the iron of their bond. In that suspended moment, Ryan felt the full weight of redemption uncoiling, not a solitary path, but one shared with this chosen pack, forging justice from the ashes of loss. Ava's whisper cut the dark. "We're safe here, with you." The rumble faded, retreating into the night. But the threat lingered, a promise of confrontation on the horizon. The vows held, unbreaking as the canyon cradled their vigil, the first threads of truth weaving tighter under the watchful stars. If this tale of unbreakable bonds is stirring something in you, smash that like button. It helps spread these stories of honor and heart to riders everywhere. The night clung to the safe house like a shroud, the canyon's chill seeping through the timbers, despite the dying embers in the stone hearth. Flickering lantern light played across the faces of the iron vows, etching deep lines of determination into their weathered skin. Ryan stood by the window, one hand resting on the rough sill, his gaze fixed on the star-pricked darkness beyond. Ava huddled close, her head against his thigh, the stuffed bear clutched like a talisman. The rumble from earlier had vanished into the wind-swept void, but its echo lingered in the taut silence, a reminder that safety was as fragile as desert glass. Jax broke the quiet first, his voice a low anchor amid the tension. "Scouts, clear the perimeter. Nothing but coyotes out there, for now." He leaned against the table, arms crossed over his broad chest, the phoenix patch on his cut catching the light like a watchful eye. Marco nodded from his corner, the laptop screen casting a blue pallor on his focused features as he sifted through encrypted files pulled from old contacts. Voss's trail runs cold after the fire report, but there's chatter, off-grid emails tying him to a shell company. Land grab, like we thought. They burned out the block to flip it for condos. Ava's mum. She was a witness type, worked the community center there. Ryan's jaw tightened, the words stirring a fresh wave in the tide of returning memories. He glanced down at Ava, her dark eyes reflecting the lantern's glow, unblinking and trusting. "You saw them," he said softly, kneeling to meet her gaze, the floorboards groaning under his weight. The air carried the faint, comforting scent of pine sap from the walls, mingling with the sharper tang of gun oil from the crew's quiet preparations. She nodded, her small fingers tracing the edge of his tattoo again, as if drawing strength from the ink's story. In the shadows, before the fire, two men with the cans laughing low. One had a badge shine. Mommy said to run if they came back. The confession hung heavy, a thread pulling at the frayed edges of Ryan's amnesia. He remembered now, in jagged pieces, the hospital's sterile hum giving way to discharge papers he'd barely scanned, a social worker's hurried nod as he scooped Ava into his arms for those fleeting weeks. Elena gone, the house a charred skeleton. But this girl, a spark in the ruin, he'd shielded her in his sparse apartment, teaching her to rev a toy bike on the floor while he pieced together his shattered nights. "I promised," he murmured, the words tasting of ash and oath. "And then I let the fog take it, walked away when they said you had kin upstate." His voice cracked, the admission a blade twisting in old wounds. Ava shook her head, pressing closer, her warmth a quiet defiance against his guilt. "You didn't walk. You fought the papers, said I was safe with you, but the bad men scared the helpers away." She paused, her breath steadying like a calming engine idle. "You're my safe place, still." The crew watched in respectful hush, Lena sliding a tin mug of warm broth her way, the steam rising in lazy curls that carried hints of herbs from their last supply run. Jax met Ryan's eyes, a nod passing between them, unspoken understanding of vows that bound deeper than blood. Marco cleared his throat, turning the laptop toward the group. "Got more from your phone's cache, audio logs, voice memos you must have recorded during those weeks. Listen." He hit play, and Ryan's own voice filled the room, rough but tender, from a time when grief hadn't fully armored him. "Day 14 with the kid. She's drawing phoenixes today, says it'll bring her mum back. Elena would have loved that. Keeping my word here, vows. Iron holds." The clip ended with a child's giggle, faint and pure, slicing through the present like sunlight through canyon cracks. Ryan's chest tightened, emotions long dammed surging forth, regret for the lost days, fury at the corruption that had orphaned her twice over. "We hit Voss's trail at dawn," Ryan said, rising with renewed steel in his spine, the decision settling like gravel under tires. "Not with fists, truth first. Old contacts in the press, the ones who owe us from the flood relief ride, expose the shell, the arson cover. But if they come—" He trailed off, glancing at Ava, who met his look with quiet resolve. The crew stirred, a symphony of murmurs and motions. Jack sketching routes on a faded map, the pencils scratching like whispers of strategy. Marco encrypting data to a secure drop. Lena checking Ava's makeshift bedroll with a mother's efficiency, tucking in an extra blanket scented of desert wildflowers. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters like impatient knuckles, carrying the cool promise of pre-dawn. Ryan stepped onto the porch with Ava trailing, her hand in his, a small anchor against the vast night. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to human frailties and strengths. "I don't deserve this trust," he admitted, voice low as the riverbed's hush. "The fire took my light. Elena left me hollow." Ava tilted her head, the oversized jacket he'd draped over her shoulders swallowing her frame. "But you gave light back, to me. Promises don't break just 'cause you forget. They wait." Her words pierced the armor, a moral compass realigning in the dark. He pulled her into a loose hug, the leather of his cut creaking softly, her hair smelling of motel soap and road dust. In that embrace, redemption flickered, not as a blaze, but a steady flame, fueled by the family he'd chosen and the one fate had thrust upon him. The crew's low voices drifted from inside, planning the ride that would chase shadows into light, justice not in vengeance, but in unburying truths long suppressed. As the first grey light touched the eastern cliffs, painting them in subtle silvers, the group gathered their gear. Bikes gleamed faintly in the gloom, engines primed for the journey. But a distant glint caught Ryan's eye, a vehicle's headlights, probing the canyon mouth like wary predators. Jack signaled from the door, his silhouette solid against the lantern's fade. "They're early. Mount up." Ava climbed behind Ryan without hesitation, her arms locking around him, the bear secured in a saddlebag. The convoy ignited in sequence, a rolling thunder that shook the earth, dispersing into the twisting paths where loyalty met the dawn. The road ahead curved through arroyos, dust rising in their wake like veils lifted from secrets. Ryan felt the pull of the promise fully now, no longer a ghost but a guiding roar, binding him to Ava, to the vows, to the honor that outlasted scars. Shadows pursued, but in the growing light, the iron of their bond shone unbreakable, mile by winding mile. The dawn light fractured across the canyon walls, splintering into shards of pale gold that chased the shadows from the arroyos. Ryan's Harley led the convoy, its engine a steady growl cutting through the crisp air, heavy with the scent of dew-kissed sage and the faint metallic bite of impending rain. Ava's arms encircled his waist, her small frame molded against his back like a shield forged in quiet trust. Behind them, the iron vows thundered in formation, Jax flanking left on his chopper, Marco and Lena weaving through the twists on lighter scouts. Their bikes a synchronized pulse against the rugged terrain. The pursuing headlights had multiplied, 3 sets now, sleek sedans slicing through the dust like knives testing flesh. Ryan's grip tightened on the handlebars, the leather-wrapped grips worn smooth from countless miles, vibrating with the road's unyielding rhythm. Wind whipped past, tugging at his cut, carrying whispers of the night's confessions, Ava's tale of shadowed figures, the audio log's echo of his forgotten vow. Memory flooded fuller now, no longer fragments, but a rushing torrent. Those weeks post-fire, her laughter in his dim apartment, teaching her to tie knots with bootlaces, while he stared at Elena's empty chair. He'd signed papers in a haze, believing distant relatives would claim her, but the social worker's hurried exit, the anonymous threat scrawled on notes, Voss's handiwork shielding the arsonists. Guilt coiled in his gut, sharp as canyon thorns, but so did resolve, a fire rekindled from embers, long thought cold. The lead sedan surged closer, its grille gleaming like predatory teeth in the rising sun. Jax's voice crackled over the comms, steady as bedrock. "They're pushing. Take the left fork. Narrows the chase." Ryan nodded to himself, banking the bike into the turn, tires skidding on loose gravel that sprayed like sparks from flint. The path funneled into a slot canyon, walls rising sheer and red, the air cooling to a hush broken only by the roar of engines echoing off stone. Ava buried her face against his jacket, her breath warm through the leather, but she didn't falter. "Hold on," he murmured. The words a vow renewed, his voice carrying over the wind's howl. The sedans hesitated at the mouth, then plunged in, but the terrain favored the bikes, agile shadows darting through boulders, while the cars lumbered, fenders scraping rock. Marco peeled off, circling back to flank, his scout bike a ghost in the dust. Got eyes on 'em, 2 plain, 1 unmarked cruiser, Voss's ride, plate matches. Ryan's pulse quickened, the phoenix on his arm seeming to burn under his sleeve. Not violence, he reminded himself. Their code demanded truth over brute force, justice carved from exposure, not blood. But protection, that was ironclad. They burst from the canyon onto a plateau, the horizon opening to a vast basin dotted with creosote and distant mesas, the sun now a fierce orb gilding everything in unforgiving clarity. Ryan signaled a pull-off at an abandoned overlook, tires crunching to a halt on sun-baked earth. The vows fanned out, engines idling low, a wall of chrome and determination. The sedan skidded up 50 yards out. Doors slamming as 4 figures emerged, suits crisp but dusty. Voss at the fore, his badge catching the light like a false promise. Tall and lean, with a face carved from suspicion, he adjusted his tie, eyes narrowing on Ava peeking from behind Ryan. "Mr. Cole," Voss called, voice smooth as oiled gears, stepping forward with hands visible, though his posture screamed control. "This ends now. The girl's a ward of the state. Hand her over, and we forget this joyride." His companions fanned out, hands hovering near holsters, the air thickening with tension, the wind carrying the faint ozone scent of a storm brewing far off. Jax dismounted, blocking the path, his bulk a silent barrier, while Lena kept Ava close, her hand gentle on the girl's shoulder. Ryan swung off the bike, positioning himself between them, the ground firm under his boots, heat radiating through the soles. Ava's hand slipped into his, small but steady, her trust a anchor in the swelling doubt. "She's no ward," he said, voice level, edged with the gravel of roads travelled. "She's family. And you? You're the one burying truths." He pulled the cracked phone from his pocket, Marco having synced it to a portable speaker earlier, the audio ready, the video cued on a tablet Lena held. Voss's smirk faltered, eyes flicking to the devices. Bluff or blade? Ryan's mind raced, the ethical tightrope taut. Exposed too soon, and they'd spin it. Too late, and shadows deepened. But Ava squeezed his hand, her whisper cutting clear. "Tell them, like you promised." He nodded, hitting play. His own voice boomed across the plateau, the hospital vow raw and unfiltered, followed by the audio log, her giggle a pure counterpoint to the corruption. Then Marco's compiled file. Timestamps linking Voss to the shell company, blurred photos from security cams near the fire site, whispers from informants pieced into a damning mosaic. Voss's face drained of color, the suits shifting uneasily as the evidence unfolded, the sun beating down like judgment. "Fabrications," he spat, but his voice wavered, the badge's shine dulled by sweat beading on his brow. "You bikers think you can play hero? That fire was tragedy. Move along." Yet doubt crept in, his companions exchanging glances, the moral weight pressing like the canyon's embrace. Ryan stepped closer, not aggressive but unyielding, the wind rustling his cut like pages of an old ledger. "Tragedy you engineered, for land, for greed. Ava saw it. 2 men, cans in the dark, one with a badge." Her voice joined, small but piercing from Lena's side. "I saw you, the tall one, laughing." Voss froze, the plateau's silence amplifying the crack in his facade. No guns drawn, no charges yet, just truth, laid bare under the relentless sky, eroding lies like water on stone. The detective's radio crackled, a dispatcher's voice urgent and distant. "Voss, stand down! Internal affairs en route, all units." Someone had leaked. Marco's contacts, the Vow's network of quiet favors, tipping the scales. Voss backed toward his car, eyes darting like cornered prey, his empire crumbling in the light. "This isn't over," he snarled, but the fight bled out, sedans peeling away in a spray of dust, tails between legs. The crew exhaled as one, engines firing up in celebration. But Ryan lingered, pulling Ava into a full embrace, her head against his chest, thumping with his heartbeat. Memories solidified now, every laugh, every bedtime story spun from road tales, the promise etched deeper than ink. "I remembered," he whispered, the words a release, redemption washing over him like the approaching rain's first drops, cool on sun-scorched skin. Jax clapped his shoulder, the vows mounting with grins, the convoy reforming for the final stretch home. But as they rode out, the basin unfolding in waves of green-tinged earth, a single sedan lingered on the horizon. Voss, perhaps, or another shadow. Vowing retaliation, the road twisted toward confrontation's end, loyalty's fire burning bright, pulling Ryan from isolation into the embrace of family chosen and fate sealed. Ava's arms tightened, her voice on the wind. We did it. Not yet, he thought, but close. The iron vow holding true, one dawn at a time. The rain came down in sheets as the convoy crested the final ridge, turning the basin into a mosaic of silver-streaked earth and glistening creosote. Ryan's Harley sliced through the downpour, wipers slapping rhythmically on his helmet visor, the engine's roar muffled to a steady thrum under the storm's fury. Ava pressed against him, her jacket slick and heavy, but her hold unshakable, a quiet testament to the bond that had pulled him from the void. Behind, the iron vows trailed like loyal shadows, tires hissing on wet blacktop, Jax's chopper cutting a path through the mist that rose from the warming ground. The air tasted of ozone and renewal, washing away the dust of chases and secrets. They pulled into the outskirts of a small town, nestled against the foothills, the kind of place where neon-lit diners glowed like beacons against the grey. Ryan eased off the throttle, guiding the bike toward a weathered community hall, the same one Ava's mom had run before the fire, now a hub for locals piecing together lives from the ruins. The building's facade, repainted in fresh white but scarred by smokestains at the edges, stood as a silent survivor. Engines quieted one by one, the crew dismounting with splashes in shallow puddles, steam rising from exhaust pipes like sighs of relief. Jack shook water from his beard, grinning through the wet as he clapped Ryan on the back. Storms breaking clean, brother, just like us. Inside, the hall hummed with subdued energy, folding tables laden with coffee urns, steaming gently, the rich aroma mingling with the damp earthiness seeping through open doors. A handful of townsfolk gathered, neighbors who'd lost homes in the blaze, eyes weary but kindled with hope. Marco set up the laptop on a podium, its screen casting a steady glow amid the fluorescent hum, while Lena guided Ava to a chair, draping a dry blanket over her shoulders that smelled faintly of lavender from the crew's stores. The girl clutched her bear, its fur damp but resilient, her gaze fixed on Ryan as he approached the front, the weight of the room settling on him like a well-worn cut. Voss's retreat hadn't ended the threat. Whispers over comms confirmed internal affairs had hauled him in, but the shell company's tendrils ran deep, lawyers already spinning webs. Ryan cleared his throat, the microphone crackling softly, his voice carrying the gravel of roads and regrets. "We've all felt the burn of that night," he began, eyes scanning faces etched with shared loss. Homes gone, families torn, but it wasn't fate. It was greed, buried under badges and lies. He nodded to Marco, who cued the compilation, the video of his hospital promise, the audio logs of quiet days with Ava, the pieced-together evidence of cans in the dark, Voss's emails lighting up like incriminating flares. Gasps rippled through the crowd, murmurs building to a swell of righteous anger, the storm outside tapping against windows like applause. Ava stood then, small but steady, climbing onto the podium with Lena's help. The blanket trailed like a cape, her voice clear over the speakers, unadorned and piercing. "I saw them, the men who laughed while it burned, but he saved me, promised I'd always have a safe place." She pointed to Ryan, her finger steady, the room falling silent as eyes turned to him. Flashes hit him full force, Elena's hand in his before the flames, Ava's tiny one weeks later, knotting that first bootlace with determination. The amnesia had been a mercy's cruel veil, but truth shredded it, leaving redemption raw and real. He stepped beside her, arm around her shoulders, the contact grounding him amid the emotional tide. The hall erupted, not in chaos, but in unity. A local reporter, tipped by Vow's contacts, filmed it all, her camera's red light blinking like a heartbeat. Calls rang out, to state investigators, to the press beyond town lines. Jax coordinated from the sidelines, his phone buzzing with confirmations, arrest warrants drafting, the shell company's facade cracking under scrutiny. Lena knelt by Ava, whispering encouragements, while Marco synced files to secure servers, ensuring the truth spread like wildfire, uncontainable now. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle, sunlight piercing clouds in hesitant rays that painted the wet pavement in shimmering pools. As the gathering dispersed into action, folks hugging Ava, thanking Ryan with handshakes firm as oaths, the crew gathered in a loose circle by the bikes. Jax lit a cigarette, the flame flaring briefly against the damp, exhaling a plume that twisted upward. "Voss'll sing, mark my words, and the rest. They'll fold when the light hits." Ryan nodded, watching Ava play with a group of kids near the door, her laughter a melody cutting through the lingering storm scent. The bear sat propped against her knee, sentinel to the joy reclaiming her face. "I almost lost this," he said quietly, voice thick. "The promise, her, but you all. You rode it back." Lena punched his arm lightly, her smile crooked under rain-damp hair. "Family doesn't forget, we remind." Marco packed his gear, the duffel zipping with finality, while Jax crushed his smoke under boot heel. They mounted up one last time, engines humming to life in a chorus of solidarity, the town hall shrinking in mirrors as they rolled toward open road. Ava rode with Ryan, her arms secure, the wind drying their clothes as the sun broke fully, gilding the horizon in warm gold. No shadows trailed now. The basin stretched clear, a canvas of second chances. Miles later, at a roadside overlook where the desert met sky, they stopped. The crew sprawled on sun-warmed rocks, sharing water from canteens that tasted of metal and victory. Ava traced patterns in the dirt, phoenix wings unfolding, while Ryan sat beside her, the phoenix on his arm a mirror to her art. Memory was whole now. Elena's legacy in every vow kept, Ava's future woven into his. "Home?" she asked, looking up with eyes bright as dawn. He ruffled her hair, the gesture paternal, earned. "Yeah, kid, wherever the road takes us with the vows." As the sun dipped low, painting the cliffs in fiery hues, the convoy reformed for the ride north, to a new safe house, rebuilt lives, justice's quiet echo. Bonds forged in fire, held eternal, promises blooming from ashes into legacy. Ryan revved the throttle, Ava's laugh on the breeze. The iron vow complete, redemption not in endings, but in the endless ride forward, family eternal under the vast forgiving sky. Thank you for riding this journey with us. Stories like Ryan and Ava's remind us that honor endures. If their tale touched your heart, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of courage and chosen family.